Welcome to the New Mexico Suncast, and the New Mexico Sun. Senator Crystal Brantley is with us, and right in the middle of the legislative session, you've got a little break, I guess, till 11:30.
We're on the floor again at 11:30. We had a late night last night, left at about 7 p.m., so we're back at it today.
Well, Crystal, I want to ask you, starting off, just a little bit about you personally. Tell us about District 35, where you live, how are your friends, family, and everybody up there?
You know, geographically, District 35, I believe, is the largest in the state. So I cover 7 counties, really the southwest corner of New Mexico. I was elected in 2020, and when I became at that time the first Republican to ever hold this office, the first female, made a lot of headline news. I was elected by Democrats, and quite frankly, it encompassed that borderlands area. And whether you were a Republican or a Democrat, people were sick of what was happening on the border. And so I just carried a message that, you know, this progressive agenda and do nothing approach isn't working. And Democrats sent me to Santa Fe, and then I just, of course, ran for re-election, and they kept me here.
Is there something different between a progressive and a Democrat?
There is very much different. And I'll tell you, my district was represented since statehood by Democrats, conservative Democrats. I replaced John Arthur Smith, who was taken out in an ugly primary. Yes, there's something very different than radical progressive liberals who have really hijacked the Democrat Party. And that's unfortunate, because I think our best work is done when Democrats and Republicans come together and govern for the best interest of New Mexicans. And I will tell you that New Mexicans are not represented best by radical extremists on either side.
Either side's an important thing.
It is.
Because you have extremists on the Republican side as well.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us about District 35, your friends, family. It sounds like a lot of your friends are conservative Democrats, maybe some Republicans.
They are. I'm actually a first-generation Republican. My parents are independents. My grandparents, long blue dog Democrats, and so they can't vote for me in a primary, my own family, but they can in a general. I reside at Elephant Butte, which was really in the heart of District 35. I had 2 girls when I ran. I was a single mom. We hit the ground running. I was elected as Senator Crystal Diamond. I'm now Senator Crystal Brantley because I've since gotten married. My husband, Tom, was a single dad of 3 girls, and so together we now have 5 young daughters. We're all in this together, and I will fight really for a better New Mexico for my family and all New Mexicans' family. And
having 5 daughters gives you some motivation.
It does, right? It does.
Talk to us about the fun things. Before we started, you had to point out that you're an Aggie.
I'm an Aggie. I am an Aggie through and through. I still am very supportive of my school. When I was elected, I was running the Alumni Association there for the College of Ag. They have a big impression up here in Santa Fe as well, and I try to bring a lot of revenues back down to NMSU because a lot of it kind of just gets stuck there at UNM, and so we fight to make sure that there's equal funding for that.
Okay, so you're being interviewed by a former local.
That's right.
But don't be offended, because the Pan American Center, when you did the remodel several years ago, I did the seats.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I mean, it's the Pan American Center is one of the greatest places.
Those are such comfortable seats.
Yeah, and I'm glad they took out the middle aisle and put seats there.
And made it.
And we really came up with a really cool way to do that, and I think that's really enhanced the atmosphere.
The Pan American's great, and we put a lot of work into Aggie Memorial Stadium, the football boxes and stuff, and so we'll still welcome you down to.
It's a great community. I've got a lot of my former friends. I'm a graduate of El Dorado High School, but all my classmates went down to New Mexico State.
I'm a New Mexico State graduate, and I'm from Las Cruces. I'm a Las Cruces High School Bulldog as well. Going back to Cruces for games and stuff is going home.
Yeah. Well, what a great place to live. A lot of family still there.
I do. I still have my mom down there. I have a sister and stuff. So we spend a lot of time in Las Cruces. And since redistricting, 50% of my vote now comes out of Doñana County. Wow. And that's a first. I mean, Doñana County in that county has been really heavily represented by just Democrat legislators.
Last question about family. How does your serving, by the way, thank you for serving, because it's an amazing sacrifice that you make. How has your serving affected your family? Are there negatives and positives?
There's negatives and positives, and I have to remember that the best work that I'll ever do is really within the walls of my own home, and that's most important. And so that's my priority. And then I come out to how can I help other people's family as well. This this is a full-time job if you're doing it right. And it definitely is a sacrifice, probably more on my family than it is for me. For me, I come up here as an act of service for New Mexico. For them, it's the sacrifice, right? Because I leave them for 2 months or 1 month, depending on the session. But I also know that stepping into this leadership role sets an important example, especially for daughters. In the 5 years that I've been as a legislator, I've seen my girls grow. My 16-year-old is president of her FFA association. I have my youngest who's stepping into leadership roles. I have my middle bonus daughter who just told me this week she got accepted to OSU, which is an ag school, as I'm an ag graduate. And I think that it's important to serve as an example to these girls that you can step into leadership roles and the effectiveness that we can have, and when we're called to serve.
Yes. Well, I'm glad you talked about women and their importance in leadership.
Mm-hmm.
I have 3 daughters. I have 2 sons. But being a girl dad and a boy dad is interesting.
Different, yeah.
I remember raising my children are all grown. But you've heard people say things like, you throw a baseball like a girl.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you said that to one of my daughters, they would say, sorry, Dad, I won't throw it that hard next time.
Right.
I taught my daughters, you're limited by nothing.
We're talking about the influence of women in here. And for too long, the Democrat Party have claimed that, right? That they're the party of, empowering women. I was the only woman in this caucus, on my Republican Senate caucus, until this most recent election. I've been joined by Nicole Tobiasen, who's great. Candy Azell came over. She's a firecracker from the House. And so it's nice to have company. And while I wouldn't say we can do anything better, we can certainly do it as good and equal to. And we're bringing some girl power over on the Republican side this session.
I love that. Let's shift gears now to your 2/3 through this legislative session, 3 weeks left. What are some bills that you've either had go through? I know that the governor's right now, we're going to talk about crime in our last section. She's been announcing, signing HB 8. But what other bills right now have you been pleased with, or do you see coming up that are really important for New Mexico?
Really, I came in here as a mother. I had no background, and I was ignorant to the travesties that was happening within our child welfare system until I became a legislator. And so I'm not just motivated because I'm a senator, but because I'm a mother, and morality leads me to say we must change CYFD. I've been bringing some CYFD reform bills from day one. This is a session 5, and for the first time, we are finally getting some traction in bringing some massive reform to a failing agency. It's so disheartening because when that agency fails, it really is life or death. Kids are dying because we're not doing our job as lawmakers to come in here and mandate that agency get their stuff together. For the first time, we have a lot of traction on some important bills. I see them getting across the finish line this year. And I think the reality is that's bringing Dems and Rs, the House and the Senate together, because we can no longer ignore that problem. The media won't let us forget it. Kids have died under that agency's watch. And if we have any bit of influence over that agency, we are called to demand change. So I have a child ombudsman bill that will provide outside oversight of that agency.
What is that bill?
307, I believe. It has to get you the numbers. We don't necessarily operate by bill numbers,
Gotcha.
But the child ombudsman bill is going to make some traction. It provides independent oversight of that agency. We have some laws that will disallow the agency to hide behind this confidentiality clause where they won't relinquish information. We have a number of bills that just incentivize foster families, tax incentives and whatnot, and we're hell-bent to get some stuff done.
You might be interested in this. Just yesterday, I interviewed a woman who works with trafficked children with the New Mexico Dream Center. I don't know if you know Shelley Repp.
She's amazing. I've toured her facility.
So Shelley told me during the interview that there are children that have been involved in the foster care system that would rather live on the streets of one of our cities in New Mexico than be in foster care. That is a really scary thing.
Could you imagine? And we have facilities which are state-run where children have been raped, which they run away, which they're unresponsive to when their needs are met. And it's you can't spend our way out of this problem, because I sat on Senate Finance for the previous 4 years, and we had given them all the financial resources and assets that agency has asked for. We're not going to buy our way out of the problems of that. We've got to dismantle and rebuild that agency. We're getting a lot of traction on that. Something that's also very important to me, and really because it's geographically the area I represent, is I don't think that the border security bills that we've brought forward are getting enough attention. And, border security is public safety, but a failed public safety special session, which, the legislator met and immediately adjourned. We didn't hear a single bill. The governor has indicated that she was going to make public safety a priority this session. And I just want to send that message that we're not talking about immigration. We're going to let the immigration issues up to our federal delegation. We're talking about the crime that continues to flood in by our border, the fentanyl crossing that is killing our kids here in New Mexico. This is not a Republican or a Democrat platform.
Do you know people that live on or near the border?
Very well.
And what do they say to you?
It's a crisis. It's been a crisis. We're seeing, drug cartel presence there at alarming rates. And this is not a humanitarian concern in which we're getting people who are fleeing for a better life. This is criminal activity that we are leaving the floodgates wide open for them to come in here. I have a bill that simply allows local governments to be reimbursed for the cost of border security. And what is that? The humanitarian camps that they have to pay to put up, the additional law enforcement, something as basic as trash collection, right, to keep our counties clean. And so that's a bill that's being championed by our Association of Counties. And all we're asking is that those municipalities be reimbursed for the cost that it has taken them really to kind of patrol and clean that border.
How does a person feel? Let's say it's a homemaker with kids in a home. She looks out her ranch window and she sees something going on with people that are kind of scary 200 yards out on her land. Is that just terrifying?
It's got to be terrifying, right? Because it's a life or death situation. And these aren't people who are coming up looking for water or shelter or, to get out of the sun or heat. These are people who are crossing fentanyl. These are the baddest of the bad guys who are moving firearms back and forth. And we've got to have a presence down there on the border.
What's the pushback from the other side of the aisle?
I think a lot of times people like to confuse the immigration conversation with the criminal activity. And that's why I want to separate that stuff. In the case of just saying, okay, at least can we agree that our counties should be reimbursed for their cost that they're incurring down there. I have another really important bill that we're going to get somewhat funded. I hope it gets a lot more traction, but I put a lot of capital outlay towards. And that's a communication infrastructure along the border. It's a $3 million ask where we can put cell phone towers. Because in addition, during this crisis, you don't even have cell phone service down there. And in the 5 years I've been here, my first year, I got a courtesy call as I walked off the Senate floor to let me know that state police officer from Lawrenceburg, Darian Jarrett, was just murdered in the line of fire. My last session, I got a call that same thing, a courtesy call to let me know the police officer had just been murdered in Las Cruces, with Officer Hernandez. And I thought, if we, at the very minimum, we're not doing enough to protect our frontline guardians, right? Those we've put out there to protect us. We're failing New Mexicans. And a lot of that down there along southern New Mexico is we're letting this criminal activity come through. And we don't talk about that enough in Santa Fe. It's kind of a hush-hush. It's too polarizing. I talk about it, and I was sit here by the Democrat voters along the border area.
Well, and we guess we should just transition right into talking about crime. Not a lot of large communities. Las Cruces, Deming.
This is my larger, yeah.
Those are pretty large communities. Are they faced with similar crime activity like you'd see in an Albuquerque or Farmington?
Yeah, the crime, I'm going to tell you that crime in New Mexico is now not just an Albuquerque issue. It's an urban and a rural concern. Crime is skyrocketing everywhere, especially the amount of fentanyl.
And it's all related to border things you've already
I think a lot of it's related to border. A lot of it is frankly related to policy. We're not cracking down in New Mexico. This is a lawless land in which we push back. We continue to overregulate our police departments. We make it so hard for them to do their job, and yet we won't hold our criminals accountable. We have a revolving door where judges let these guys back out on the street just as soon as they're arrested. We're not holding these guys accountable. We have empty jails in the state of New Mexico.
Why is this catch and release? I mean, at one time I heard it was because the jails are overcrowded, but now I understand they're not even 30% full.
They're empty. And we have all these criminals on the streets. The reality is a lot of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, this progressive way of thinking is that no one belongs behind bars. I disagree. Some of these guys, the bad guys, belong behind bars. And those that do need mental help need to be forced into treatment. I will tell you that we'll talk about the crime package. A portion of that crime package just passed, which HB 4. I was happy to sign on as a sponsor of that because that addressed the competency issue here in New Mexico. It was a priority for my law enforcement that was saying a lot of these bad guys come before judges, and they're not bad, but they need some mental help, and they are declared incompetent to stand trial and therefore released because they're incompetent. And so now what that's put a little teeth in the law to mandate that they will have to get the mental health concerns and have their mental health needs met. It's not voluntary. In some cases, the judge can mandate it, and that's what we need.
Well, the statistics are scary for how many people are repeat offenders that were not prosecuted because their competency was questioned. And there's also people that have been arrested and released. And I understand the numbers, over 60% of those people are reoffending.
They are. And I had heard a staggering statistic, I can't remember the details, where it was saying just a small percent of these guys, it's always the same people, right? It's always the same people that continue to repeat. And just a small percent of those are one-time offenders and you never see them again. These cops get to know these people by name. They're in and out of the system. And so we're trying to create some accountability and push back on this.
So I don't know all there is in ins and outs of the legislative session and how the negotiations happen. But if yourself and your Republican constituents and the Democrat caucus would get together in a room and put together 20 ideas to complete a crime package, why isn't that possible?
First I'll tell you that I was honored to be appointed as the ranking Republican on Senate Judiciary Committee. That's a very important committee, especially when we've identified that public safety was going to be the priority this session. We just passed out of Judiciary and also on the Senate floor, it's up in the governor's desk, what the Democrats are calling their crime package. And I want to back up and say it's a bipartisan crime package. Many of elements of that were Republican ideas and had been for many years. I mentioned that I had myself signed on to the competency portion. I supported that bill. Absolutely, I would support it. It was a comprehensive bill. And every bit of that section is going to make a little bit of difference in New Mexico. But it's not going to make transformative change to this. And so we had a great debate on the Senate floor. I have a very respectful relationship with my Senate Judiciary Chairman, Senator Joseph Cervantes. And when I was debating that bill, we brought forth many amendment suggestions. And it was other bills that are circulating around House that were not included in that package. What I left hopeful that night after we passed their crime package out is that there was an agreement to hear those bills. While they may not have been included in the crime package, the omnibus bill, that there was an agreement to consider those bills. And one of the most important ones is one that we're hearing from the district attorney in Bernalillo, and that's dealing with juvenile justice reform. We have a lot of bad teenage kids out there who aren't being held accountable. He wanted to lower the age. He wanted to include the list of offenses.
And by the way, he is a Democrat.
He is a Democrat. I think that shows that and I'm going to tell you that Democrats and Republicans both, it doesn't matter what your party affiliation, is sick of New Mexico crime rate and being so dangerous. We want a safer place to raise all families. I hope that bill is given some real consideration. Representative Andy Ream is doing a really good job trying to really champion that. Catch and release. There's a lot of felon in possessions. There's a lot of good bills out there that would make a difference. What I get frustrated at is all these bills that address crime, and then I'll tell you on my agenda in judiciary are some gun bills that really are overreaching, impacting law-abiding citizens. We're missing the target, right? Our focus needs to be on how can we really make meaningful change. I don't have to tell you this, but my reminder to New Mexicans is, in New Mexico, we alternate between a 60-day policy budget session and a 30-day budget. And I say that because next year when we convene, it's a 30-day budget session. And if it's not germane, if it's not about the budget, we can't hear it. And so if we don't pass meaningful crime legislation or CYFD reform in the next, 20 days that we have left, we can't hear those bills for 2 years. And New Mexico can't wait 2 years to change. New Mexico, we're sick of it. All New Mexicans are demanding change, and we can make a difference if we get on it today.
Negative population growth in New Mexico for many years. Would solving some of these crime issues begin to attract people back to our state?
Of course it would, right? And also we just have a tendency in this legislature of passing anti-business bills. Let's incentivize business to come to New Mexico. We know that we have a med mal problem. Our doctors are fleeing New Mexico in droves. If we don't address that in 20 days, it won't be addressed for 2 years. How many doctors will we lose in the next 2 years? How many investors will say, no, the climate in New Mexico is so anti-business, I'm not going to invest there, and go to Arizona or Texas? I spent a lot of time in Las Cruces. We talked about, I can drive over to El Paso, and the second I hit the state line, there's prosperity. There's stores, there's buildings, right? And I think, why not? New Mexico, we have so many amazing resources. Thanks to a strong oil and gas economy, we have the money to make the investments today in New Mexico. But legislators, it's not a money problem, it's a policy problem. And that falls on us to bring that change.
Crystal, thank you for joining us today. We really
Happy to.
appreciate your service.